Florida ethics code is very clear. The governor or any public official is not supposed to be taking gifts meant to influence a future decision or reward a past decision.
One of the largest and most politically influential home builders in Florida essentially gave the governor a $30,000 golf simulator.
A golf simulator that was installed in the governor's mansion in 2019.
So we heard the governor has this amazing golf simulator that was gifted to him by a real estate mogul. Can we as constituents try the golf simulator?
Couple practice swings?
No, I don't think so.
We knew this wouldn't be easy. People like us don't usually benefit from Ron DeSantis' deals with wealthy political donors.
Security told us there was a list that we could get on to possibly play it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Have a great day.
No matter how hard we tried, we couldn't get access to the golf simulator. So we had to settle for one that was more in our price range.
Way past it.
$30,000 is an extravagance for people like us. But for Ron DeSantis, it's just the tip of the iceberg.
Ron DeSantis has raised record-breaking sums of money as governor of Florida. And a lot of that money has come from some of the biggest businesses in both the state and the country as a whole, as well as many of the country's billionaires.
That's Jason Garcia. He knows the Florida swamp better than anybody.
I've been an investigative reporter in Florida for more than 20 years now. I specialize in covering the influence big businesses have in public policy.
The story of the golf simulator is a window into how this often works.
It was technically a loan through this really obscure entity known as the Governor's Mansion Commission. But essentially what it allowed is Ron DeSantis to have access to a $30,000 golf simulator at the governor's mansion provided by a real estate developer who needs help from state government. The DeSantis administration has steered tens of millions of dollars to a highway interchange project where one of the main beneficiaries is going to be a development being built by this very same home builder.
Ron can't help himself. The guy just loves golf.
So the Tampa Bay Times actually obtained this internal memo where the governor's political staff was planning to essentially sell access to the governor, in part by using the golf course. They had an actual price list. Golf in a foursome, $25,000 per person. You want to golf one-on-one with Ron DeSantis? $100,000. Folks have figured out this is really a good way to build influence with him.
Not being able to use the golf simulator, that hurt. But it's the least of the damage that Floridians are experiencing as a result of DeSantis' fundraising. Florida is now officially the inflation hotspot of the country, and that didn't happen by accident. If you live in the Sunshine State, there's one issue that's impossible to escape.
Housing generally is the #1 issue in Florida. Cities like in Miami, Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, everywhere is dealing with affordability crisis.
5 of the 10 most overpriced housing markets in the U.S. are in Florida. The rate of evictions and foreclosures is the second highest in the country. So what have DeSantis and the Florida legislature done about it?
The main thing they did is they passed essentially what was one giant industry subsidy for apartment and affordable housing developers. Now, what it didn't do is provide any sort of immediate relief or immediate protection to people already housed, right? This is all a play to build more housing, but obviously most of that will take years to play out.
Without any meaningful relief from the state, tenants across Florida were forced to turn to local solutions.
This may be the last year that I live in Orange County, a place where we've created so many memories because we can no longer afford to live here. So I am in favor of rent stabilization.
In Orlando, 60% of voters approved a measure calling for temporary rent control. This was the most modest form of rent control you could imagine. It would only have stopped landlords from raising the rent more than 10% for 1 year.
At the same time, other cities and counties passed their own laws to provide extremely basic protections for renters.
Things like, if your landlord is going to kick you out, they have to give you at least 2 months' notice. Or if they're going to raise the rent more than 5%, they have to give you 2 months' notice.
These modest tenant protections consistently attracted broad popular support, but they were extremely unpopular with one very powerful group of people.
The landlord industry, particularly the larger corporate developers, hate this sort of stuff. So they went to Tallahassee and they got the legislature and Ron DeSantis to pass a law that invalidates all those local protections that have passed the last few years. I don't think people have quite appreciate just how enormous this law was. This law that Ron DeSantis just signed stripped protections from more than 1.5 million renters in Florida.
So that's what DeSantis has done for renters. But what about homeowners? Florida's homeowner insurance rates are more than 3 times the national average. Why? Well, for one, Florida looks like this, making it extremely vulnerable to hurricanes and flooding.
The property insurance market in Florida is in chaos, and it has been for a few years now. What you have is many insurers just leaving the state altogether, and those that are staying are raising premiums at record paces.
Crushing insurance increases before hurricane season even enters its peak.
So how has DeSantis responded to all of this?
Ron DeSantis has signed several pieces of insurance legislation since he was a governor, all sort of ostensibly built around this idea that we're trying to stabilize the market. But what these pieces of legislation have essentially done is given the insurance industry things that it has been lobbying for years in Florida, more than a decade in some cases.
The big bill DeSantis signed was in December 2022. It had 3 major provisions.
One, it took away the rights of customers to sue their insurance companies if they don't pay claims on time or if they delay or deny claims unfairly. 2, it made it easier for insurance companies to raise rates even higher than they already are by taking away the risk that they might lose customers to a state-run insurance option. That's a place to find insurance without having to worry about, a profit motivation. And 3, they've extended an enormous amount of public subsidies to the industry in the form of below-market reinsurance. That's insurance companies buy for themselves. Under Ron DeSantis, the state of Florida has extended the amount of publicly subsidized reinsurance by $3 billion.
You think that with subsidies this big, there would be a few strings attached?
Critics would tell you that if you're going to be providing this essentially taxpayer-backed insurance to insurance companies, then there should be some immediate corresponding reduction that consumers see the benefit of the risk that they themselves are taking on.
We have yet to see any signs of relief for consumers. DeSantis, meanwhile, has been rewarded with $3.9 million in donations from the industry. It's a similar story for energy costs in the Sunshine State. Some of the first lobbyists to join Ron on the golf course came from utility companies that have since donated millions of dollars to his campaign. And it's not hard to guess what they were lobbying for.
Rates have gone up significantly in Florida, and that's partly the result of the 3 main power companies here, Florida Power and Light, Duke Energy, and TECO, all won the right to dramatically raise their rates just a couple of years ago. FPL is the state's biggest utility. I think it's got more than 6 million customers in the state now. It also got the biggest rate increase by far, roughly $5 billion over 4 years. It's an enormous rate increase, far bigger than anyone has ever seen in Florida before.
Energy bills got so high that residents in the Panhandle started organizing petitions and protests against the company. But one man in particular made all of this possible.
Ultimately, the elected official most responsible for this is the governor. The electric companies in Florida are supposed to be regulated by this body known as the Public Service Commission, but each of those appointees are appointed by the governor. And one of the things we've learned over the years is very few political appointees go against the governor's wishes on any sort of major decision.
My view is, we want to have affordable energy in the state of Florida, and we're committed to doing that, and that's where we're going to be on that.
Okay, so we've covered what DeSantis has done to the cost of housing, insurance, and energy, all issues that average Floridians are painfully familiar with. But there is one huge story that has completely flown under the radar. It's about, wait for it, tax policy.
Just before his re-election, I did a study looking at every tax cut and tax increase that Ron DeSantis signed during his first 4 years as governor. And what we found is that he had cut taxes for businesses by more than $5 billion, but he had raised taxes on consumers by more than $1 billion. So, his record would tell you, look, we've cut taxes by $4 billion, but that's because there was a $5 million tax cut for businesses and a $1 billion tax increase for consumers.
And the businesses we're talking about here aren't mom and pop shops.
We're talking about companies like Disney, like Comcast, the very largest corporations have saved an enormous amount of money in taxes under Ron DeSantis.
It's important to remember all of this when you see DeSantis going after quote-unquote woke corporations like Disney. For all of his culture war rhetoric, there's another side of DeSantis that he doesn't want us to see.
Being very aggressive and very loud on culture war fronts is very effective at distracting folks from realizing that a lot of the economic policies that are being passed are not necessarily in their best interest. People are too busy thinking about things like transgender athletes in competitive sports to notice that, hey, your taxes are going up while Disney's go down.
Now that DeSantis is running for president to make America Florida, we should ask what that would actually mean.
I think you will see an administration that is very focused on the policy needs of the wealthiest taxpayers and investors in the economy, and then trying to make the case that we will all ultimately benefit in some trickle-down way from that.
That's what they said about the golf simulator, and well, we all know how that story ended. That's the sad truth about how things actually work in DeSantis' Florida. The rich give gifts to the governor, he hands them billions in return, and working people are the ones left picking up the bill. Thank you for watching this video. If you like the content, subscribe and follow this channel to get more Perfect Union on your feed. And if you have any ideas for stories, drop them in the comments below.